President Biden is expected to quickly sign into law a new $40 billion aid package for Ukraine. The Senate overwhelmingly approved the measure yesterday with an 86-11 vote. It is the largest foreign aid package passed by Congress in at least 2 decades. Separately, the U.S. also is sending $100 million in additional military equipment to Ukraine. The package includes howitzers, tactical vehicles, and counter-artillery radars. Also, Ukraine's foreign minister is criticizing NATO for what he says is a lack of support for his country. Last night, during a nationwide telethon to raise funds for Ukraine, Dmytro Kuleba said in part, "Could you name at least one consensus decision made by NATO over the past 3 months that would benefit and help Ukraine?" He continued, "Yes, it is true that the alliance members individually or in small groups are really doing awesome and important work providing vital assistance. But NATO as an institution has done nothing during this time." Joe.
Let's bring in right now retired 4-star United States Army General and former CIA Director David Petraeus. General, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it so much. Why don't we begin with that statement from the foreign minister? What would your response be?
Well, my response would be that he's under enormous pressure, as is his President Zelensky. They're all feeling, again, this months-long tension as they've first held back the Russians, won the battles of Kyiv and Sumy and Chernihiv, and now also Kharkiv in the east. But as your reporting covered correctly, there's a big battle brewing down in Luhansk. They are, again, under enormous pressure, and no commander's ever had enough troops, money, bandwidth nowadays, or drones. And, you know, I never felt that I did, even in the surge in Iraq. You always need more. You're always under pressure. And I think that was essentially an expression of a manifestation of that enormous pressure that they've been under now for 2.5 months since this invasion began.
So, General, before we go deep into Russia, let's first talk about where the president is right now in Asia. We've been talking for some time as a nation since Barack Obama was president about that shift to Asia, that focus on Asia, which we have not done. I'm curious, how is the United States doing right now, challenging an aggressive China, even in its weakened state? Are we starting to line our allies up effectively? And what are our biggest challenges moving forward?
Well, I think we are, Joe. As you noted, since the second term of the Obama administration, we've been trying to do a rebalance to Asia, now the Indo-Pacific, as it is termed. The Trump administration, of course, continued that, very much changed the conversation on China. And this administration came in intending immediately to focus again on the Indo-Pacific region. But first it was Afghanistan, then it was Ukraine, and they're trying to get back onto their strategic glide path, and it's been difficult. But I think the ASEAN summit that was held, a number of other initiatives, the first meeting of all of the Quad that was held earlier, all of this, again, trying to get back to what they believe, and I agree, is the main effort for our country. There's a lot to be done in every different respect. I think the big intent in this particular trip is to lay out the economic vision, because the glaring absence in the overarching strategy of the United States and its allies and partners is the absence of a trade component. We pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We haven't figured out how to get back into that. So there'll be pieces and parts of again, what might look like elements of a trade agreement, of an economic initiative. That's the most important component of all of this. Indeed, as the Pentagon and all of our other departments and agencies make that change in focus. And that is very much ongoing and really has been since it was announced back in the days of the second part of the Obama administration.
General Petraeus, good morning. It's great to have you on the show. We haven't had a chance to speak with you in some time, so we'd love to just get your general view of what's happened in Ukraine over the last 3 months or so. What has surprised you, perhaps, about the ineptitude of the Russian military, the strength of the Ukrainian military, the will of the people there, the leadership of Zelensky, and the rallying led by President Biden of the West? What's your overall view of what we've seen here?
Well, I think the biggest of the big ideas is that Putin set out to make Russia great again. But what he's really done is make NATO great again. And of course, you see now the accession of Finland and Sweden. And we'll work through these issues with President Erdogan of Turkey. I think they're resolvable. And frankly, he's made America great again. After the withdrawal from Afghanistan, there were countries around the world that said you can't depend on the Americans anymore. They're a great power in decline. And what we've shown is that is not the case. We still can lead the world and do lead the world when it really matters to us. And this is just one of those cases. Certainly, I think everyone has been reassessing what is the realm of the possible in Ukraine since the beginning. I did not ever say, in fact, I said that Russia would not be able to take Kyiv and certainly would never be able to control it. That said, even I was astounded at what you rightly termed the ineptitude in virtually every category by which you might evaluate a military force. And having been part of an invasion of a country, I have a little bit of a reference, in fact, to do that. And then the Ukrainians have been extraordinary. Now, I was there not long after President Zelensky was elected. I went down to the Donbass, went to Kharkiv and other cities, and I had a sense that these guys are ready to fight if it comes to it. And obviously they have been. What I think has been so amazing is the resourcefulness, not just of the military forces, but of an entire nation at war. The entire country has mobilized behind their men and women who are actually doing the fighting, but everybody is engaged in some way. In the way they have taken this massive amount of arms and ammunition that we above all have provided, but other countries as well, and UK deserves special mention here, the way they've taken those and just shoved them right into the front lines and made great use of them is really very, very impressive. The key, I think, right now, Willie, over the next few weeks is to see if Russia succeeds in that offensive that you mentioned down in the far southeast, to see if the Ukrainians can capitalize on the momentum they achieved around Kharkiv in the east and can roll up the Russian flank from the north. But then what may happen is the Russians may say, okay, this is about as much as we're going to get. We're going to harden the front lines. We're going to make it very difficult for them to take this back. We're going to build it around urban areas, just as the Ukrainians have built their defenses around them. And we're going to declare this part of Russian Federation. We're going to annex it. And we may even throw the nuclear umbrella over top of that and say, if you try to take this back, you're really tempting fate. So this is something that is going to stretch out, I fear, for quite some time. I don't see President Zelensky able to accept any kind of Russian gain that has been made since 24 February, and maybe not even the ones that were made back in 2014 at the end of the day, given what's transpired and the sacrifices that they've made. And President Putin is going to see how much more they can get and then try to hang on to all of that. So I think we have the prospect of what could be a drawn-out affair, unless the one possibility we need to watch to see if it happens is the possible collapse of Russian forces. If they start to crumble, obviously their morale has been very poor. Their discipline has been non-existent. Their capabilities have been underwhelming, but they still have a lot of artillery, rockets, missiles, and bombs. They're making those used in a variety of different places, making that weight felt. Nonetheless, it's possible that they could at some point start to crumble, and it's very hard to predict that, having been in some fights where the enemy crumbled at a certain point, but you couldn't predict it right up until the moment that that happened. And so we should be watching for indicators of that possibility. But that would be, I think, the best case for Ukraine. The more likely case, again, I think, is that Russia hardens this, annexes it, and says, this is ours, and you try to take it, and you'll pay a heavy price.
As you say, General, if you go back to January, February, all the chest thumping by Vladimir Putin and the Russian military that they were going to roll into Kyiv and take the capital and have a victory parade and install a puppet government seems like a lifetime ago now, when you see how the dynamics of this war have changed.
Very much so.
Do you believe, General, in your assessment that Ukraine can win this war, whatever that may mean to you? I mean, certainly the United States is placing very big bets, $40 billion worth most recently, on a side that it believes can win.
Well, again, it always depends on how you define winning, because the truth is that there's been enormous destruction and loss in Ukraine already, needless to say, and it's going to take probably decades to rebuild, to reestablish various elements of their economy. Some of this is irreparable. By the way, so is some of the damage to Russia's economy, financial system, Putin's inner circle, and business community. So I think everyone is losing who's actually directly participating in this. Ironically, of course, it is NATO that emerges from this much stronger with 2 additional very capable countries that will surround the Baltic. It's now completely controlled by NATO, and add 2 very important countries to what is going to be a struggle of the future, maybe not a battleground, but certainly a competitive zone of the future, which is the Arctic. Certainly, Ukraine can push back farther, hopefully, with the additional arms and ammunition that we're providing. It would be fantastic if they could regain everything that's been taken since 24 February. It remains to be seen, though. And again, urban fighting, which they've, in a sense, done as defenders, is difficult when you're on the offense. And they're going to have to retake some built-up areas that the Russians now control. If the Russians can demonstrate some aptitude at defending those areas, this could be a very tough fight, and it could stretch out for quite some time with a lot of loss.